So your finally commitment to final approval, the yellow brick road, right? Once the buyer has the commitment, their role is now to complete the conditions on the letter. So usually when they get a commitment letter, there's a few things, there's conditions that they have to meet before they get that actual clearance to close. Some of the items might be, they need to get home insurance. Sometimes people have duplicate names. They have to write an affidavit that it's not them. Look at the conditions. If there is something irregular there or it does not look right to you, explain why, write an explanation letter why you deposited $500,000 cash into your bank account. That could be a problem. So read the conditions on the commitment letters that you are looking at, that your buyer is receiving. That way, you are on the offense instead of on the defense, meaning you can get ahead of the problem as opposed to going backwards and saying, oh my God, I'm going to wait this long. And I didn't know that the buyer deposited $500,000 cash and now the deal is dying. You can get ahead of the game. Okay. In the meantime, the buyer attorney will be ordering the title, reviewing it for any discrepancies, sending it to the seller attorney and the bank to review. If there are any items that need attention, such as other names on the title, liens, violations, old permits, etc., the seller will need to clear those items. Let me mention this, and we'll talk a little bit more about that in a second. But, other names on the title could be like, let's say it was a couple and one of them passed away. There may be, they might need the death certificate. Sometimes there are liens on the house, something like a sidewalk lien. These things could be taken care of. They could also be closed, held with escrow. Certain violations can also be closed with. It all depends. They may need to hire an expediter to get these things done. Also, the buyer attorney will order a land survey, except for co-ops. This verifies the size and extent of the property, and the seller attorney will review all of these items. You, as the agent, follow up that all of these parties are taking care of these items. And if you do not follow up, you lose. It is going to take longer. I once had an attorney, I called her up and I said, hi, my name is Josephine from Remax Edge. I'm following up on this property. She got really rude with me and said, well, we know what we're doing and I don't need you to call. And I said, well, that's awesome. I'm so glad you guys know what you're doing. And I'm glad to be working with someone that's on top of it. But I will be calling you every week because I am on top of my job as well. So I want to make sure everything is moving smoothly. So I'll talk to you next week. It was great speaking with you. Speak to you again. And I spoke to her every week and I called every week. And guess what? She answered the phone with an attitude, but she gave me my update and I knew what was going on. And that's all that matters. So recap of the mortgage process. Always keep in touch with your buyer to make sure it's moving smoothly. Again, that way, if there are any bumps and bruises, you can be ahead of the game to try and combat those ahead of time as opposed to finding out after. Make sure the buyer's giving the mortgage rep all the documents they need. The buyer paid for the appraisal. The bank ordered the appraisal. Did they get the commitment letter? What are the conditions? Is the buyer getting all the conditions met in a timely fashion? And then finally, clear to close. This is granted once the file is complete and given to the underwriters and they approve it. Now the attorneys can start working on a close for date, time, and place. Special case scenarios, as I mentioned before. So if an appraisal comes in short, if an appraisal comes up short, there are a few options that you can explore. Ask if you may submit new comps and have a loan officer review them to adjust the appraisal amount. That's called appealing an appraisal. Does it work? It has worked one time in my 8-year span of being in real estate. It has worked one time. And normally it does not work. That is why it is important to take the comps with you. If the appraisal amounts cannot be altered, speak with the loan officers as to how much more the buyer would have to put down in order to make the deal work. Speak with your buyer about the amount to see if they could possibly put down a higher down payment to cover the gap. That is a possibility. So the buyer can put down some more money, or they might end up, it being a little bit less down payment because they need a higher mortgage. There's ways to work around it. So don't just consider a deal dead. Never consider a deal dead. Fight for your money. Talk, try to work things out, call all parties and try to work it out. Last resort is you speak with the listing agent and the attorneys about adjusting the contract price so that the buyer can obtain a lower loan amount according to the appraisal report. CO search. If it is not your listing, then follow up with the listing agent and ask that they speak with the seller to confirm the home type and any alterations that have been done. The key here is to confirm if there is official documentation to show that any changes or work have been completed and done legally. So sometimes, there'll be like an old permit that comes up, the seller was going to do work and then they never did it. So that permit just needs to be pulled. Sometimes, like I said, there are liens. Sometimes occasionally, sometimes occasionally it will come up that it's a 2-family as opposed to a 3-family. You can do things like get a letter of no objection. An expediter can help with this process. You can ask for a title search. It's worth the investment if you do this ahead of time and you're not really sure, is it a 2-family, is it a 3-family? Everything that you do ahead of time will help you when the deal is going through. And check Department of Buildings, of course. Closing the property. So once the bank has the clear to close, the attorneys need to make sure everything is ready to go on their end. They can start working on a date. We will send out a closing bill to the seller's attorney. So we want to make sure our commission check is right. Make sure you bring that bill with you to the closing. Once the date is confirmed, this is what you have to do. Number 1, set a final walkthrough on the property. Ensure that the sellers have vacated the premises and that it is ready for the walkthrough. I cannot tell you how many times people have set a final walkthrough and the seller is still there, or they left like tons and tons of furniture and garbage in the house and they never cleaned it out. Make sure the property is broom swept clean. Make sure the buyer connects with his attorney and is aware of any bank certified check amounts they need to bring to closing. And I know that you may think it's silly, like, hey, well, the attorney should be talking to their buyer about the checks they need to bring. I have also experienced a buyer showing up to closing because the attorney did not reach out to them and say, hey, these are the checks that you need to go to the bank and get and bring to the closing with you. And a 1-hour closing turned into a 4-hour closing, if it even closed, because that could postpone a closing or extend the amount of time. You want to make sure that everything runs smoothly. That is why you are here. And again, if it is your listing, make sure that you speak to the seller and they have completely moved out of the house, broom swept clean, any items that are taken or left, utilities are turned off, with the last day of service being the day of closing. If they call the company and shut off utilities before the property has the final walkthrough and before it's closed, it's going to be a problem, because the buyer is not going to know if it's just not working or if they shut it off. So everything needs to be operational for the final walkthrough. And last but not least, just a reminder, call all parties all the time. And I love this guy. He's on the roller coaster, right? That's you as a real estate agent. You're on the roller coaster at Great Adventure and you're like, what? Can't hear you. There's somebody screaming behind me. What? We have a deal? Beautiful. That is you, right? Call all parties all the time. We do have something, the sale process flow chart. It is available on the agent link page. This is something you can give to your sellers or buyers just to kind of give them an idea of how this process flows. It's a nice little quick overview of how things are going to go. And that is it. Thank you very much. That is my thank you dance.